was starting in the industry in 1985. Right out of college, I was a dumb kid, 2.6 GPA in college. Took the easiest degree I could and kind of failed my way into the plumbing industry.
How did you get to be the very first journalistic plumber?
Honestly, Brandon, I had never turned on a computer. This is but businesses are starting to use them. I got through college with a typewriter. The litmus test on leadership is when you have a really talented person that works for you. Are they proud to say they work for you? I have great conviction when it's my idea in particular. I think it's going to work. And I will get after it. And it's surprising how often I'm wrong.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Blueprint. This is Brandon Adams. Today we've got Jack Tester, first employee, previous CEO of Nexstar, and a veteran in the home services industry. This guy is going to tell us everything we need to know about what we're missing in our business. Jack, first off, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate someone of your caliber being on here.
You bet. Thank you. I appreciate the invitation, and I know you through a mutual friend, Brad Bacon, and I'm glad to help out. So,
yeah, of course. So, a little bit about, but so everyone can get to know who they're talking to. Who is Jack?
Who is Jack? Well, again, I guess from a professional side, I'll talk about that first, right? I think that's what people are listening here for, but we can talk about other stuff too. So I started in the industry in 1985. Right out of college, I was a dumb kid, 2.6 GPA in college. Took the easiest degree I could and kind of failed my way into the plumbing industry, working for the Minnesota Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors Association, making $12,000 a year, really knocking it out. And that's how I started. So I've been in the industry since 1985. Along the way, I matured a little bit and met a guy named Frank Blau, who had an idea for a new organization at that time called Contractors 2000. This was in 1991. And he asked me to get it started and get it off the ground. It was renamed Nexstar Network. Contractor 2000 was a really cool name till 2001. Then it became dated, right? So
it was old.
It got a little old, right? 2001 Space Odyssey. Nexstar was, same thing. Anyway, it was changed the name. The name was changed to Nexstar Network, and ran that company for 7 years and got it started, got it going, and it was kind of an industry phenom. And then I left and pursued the first round of a consolidation in our industry. And I went to work for ServiceMaster after I bought Rescue Router, acquired ARS shortly thereafter. I helped run that company for 7 years. And then I returned to Nexstar as a business coach, coaching manager, and then returned as president and CEO again in 2011 and ran it through 2020, stayed on as an advisor for 3 years for Nexstar. So I'm a Nexstar guy. That's where I, really learned this business, really learned about business, and really kind of made a name for myself in this industry. And then I fully retired from Nexstar September of 2023. And now I'm working on a part-time basis, helping a wonderful company in Ohio by the name of Eco Plumbers, HVAC technicians, and electricians. Help them out, helping them grow their business on a senior level, sitting on leadership meetings, doing some leadership training, just kind of an advisor, really enjoying it. So that's just a very quick thumbnail of my professional journey to today.
Well, that's about 7 careers for most people. So, congratulations for all that. One thing that you talked about is like, hey, you went to college, and you kind of failed your way into plumbing. Like, you graduated college?
I did. It took me 5 years to get a 4-year degree. I wasn't particularly motivated. Again, I got a 2.6 GPA in college. Right. So that's a B- if you're keeping track at home here, right? And I did just enough to pass. I was kind of a halfway guy. I didn't try real hard. And I realized why I didn't try real hard, Brandon, which is interesting, is I was afraid of failure. Meaning that if I try hard and failed, then I'd be a loser. But if I didn't try hard and I failed,
there was an excuse.
I had an excuse. It's fascinating how I didn't know it at the time, but
how long did it take you to figure that out?
I don't know that I really realized what a young Jack was doing until I was in my 50s. But I changed. I realized that I couldn't live that way. I had to really apply myself at age 30 when I started Nexstar. And I had a young family to take care of. Then I realized, the BS is over. It's time to get after this thing. And I really applied myself, basically with the old burn the boats. There's no retreat. I had to do it. Right. So
Yeah.
but I didn't really put words to it until I was in my early 50s. And I was really looking back on why was I that way?
Mm-hmm.
Was I unmotivated? I said, no, I wasn't unmotivated. I was just terrified of failure.
Mm-hmm.
So I was
That's interesting.
fascinated.
Self reflection as you start to go through this path is probably your greatest strength. When you start to look back at the journey you've had, and when you can self prescribe, like, hey, these are the things that I'm doing to get through things. It's not particularly. It's not that you're trying to tear yourself down. It's that you actually become a better version of yourself when you can find out what your shortcomings are and you can work on those versus trying to hide behind them. So that self reflection of that is actually very cool. I hope to continue to do that as we get older. But man, 50 it was right around the corner for me too. So I'm I'm probably still a little late, a little ways away. But
Yeah. Thank you for that. You're right. You're right.
yeah. So you said what did you graduate with out of college?
Oh, I was a communication journalism major, which was, by the way, went to the University of Minnesota in Duluth. I figured out what was the easiest major to get.
Okay.
And so I took it.
That's how you went in was
Mhm.
what's the easiest
I
degree?
want to
That's
get
what
a
you told the
degree.
advisor?
I
Uh-huh.
want to get a degree, right? I don't know.
Okay.
Today I wouldn't be as have the same compulsion to absolutely
Right.
get a degree. But back in 1980 when I started college, I
Mhm.
wanted to get a degree. I wanted to finish. I thought that was, kind of important.
Mhm.
So I just looked around and said, business is going to have too much math. I'm not good at math.
Mhm.
I'm not into the sciences or, engineering. Don't want to be
Mhm.
a teacher. Don't want to do
Right.
that.
Mhm.
Let's just take this easy degree. I had no idea what I was
Yeah.
going to do after college,
Yeah.
Brandon. I just wanted a degree.
Jack, you said something a minute ago that really kind of struck me. You said, I don't know that I would feel as strongly about having a degree at this point in my career if I could look back. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, I mean, I think a college degree is a nice thing to pursue. There is some learning you get from it, and I think you can show that you can finish something when you start. So I think, and I've summed up the value of it. Yeah, but if I think back to what I learned in college that prepared me for my business life, the one thing that I did learn was how to write concisely. Journalism. That's the one thing I thought, this is pretty cool. I've got this knowledge I've gained, this skill that I've gained, and it helped me in business. Of course, with AI now, you don't even have to learn how to write. You just talk into a
Mm.
microphone. And it's like, oh, God, my one edge is gone now, Brandon. Um, but what I would say to a younger person is, if you want to pursue a degree, do so. You know, but if you want to bury yourself in debt, you waste 4 or 5 years potentially. Get a drinking habit. These are all the risk you run, or find a great industry to get into and learn it and apply yourself.
Mhm.
There's so many people in our industry in particular. I'm talking about home services, um, that have done amazingly well, that have a GED.
Right.
Then forget a 4-year bachelor's or BA degree from university. They don't even
Right.
have a traditional high school diploma. So
Yeah, there's a bridge that needs to be gapped right there. There's a lot of people that think I can't do something as an entrepreneur. I can't do something in home services and help run a business when I don't have that skill set. But like you said, I've been quite taken back by the number of people that have sat across from me for this podcast.
wow,
Honestly, like there are very, very successful guys that haven't graduated high school that have sat across from me, and I'm just blown away because it is about the hustle and the drive
it is.
and the mental desire to, like you said, burn the boats and not give up.
Yeah. 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 I mean, college prepares you almost to be recruited by bigger companies, which is
Mm.
almost the antithesis of being an entrepreneur. So you get recruited by,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the Twin Cities, where I live right now, 3M or Target or some of the bigger employers here, right? That might view and not hire anyone on a management track unless they have
Mhm.
a degree, and sometimes a master's degree, right?
Mhm.
But, there's home service companies, there's small companies around America that aren't quite so sophisticated or picky or maybe even stupid, that they'll look at a different, they look at a person differently. Will they show up? You know, will they fight through things? Right? Will they be somebody that's got some loyalty to our business and help us grow? Those
Mhm.
things are all more important than whether they have a degree behind the wall. I got a
Yeah,
degree, but
no,
you don't see it behind the wall, right?
Yeah, that's funny. Like I have a degree as well. I've never put my diploma up anywhere. I've never shown it. I got it. It went to the closet. Nothing ever had a light of day that showed up on it. Even now, or not now, I have my own company, but before that, throughout after the first 3 or 4 years, I didn't even use a resume anymore. It was all word of mouth of people that knew me or just referred me or things like that. It's like, hey, you need to go to this place. They're looking or whatever, right?
It's interesting you say that because I have a diploma from University of Minnesota,
Hmm.
and I never put it up until I worked in the corporate office of ServiceMaster, which was a public company. It was interesting, and I was working on a bunch of MBAs and other
Hmm.
folks, and I had a nice office, and I was a senior person there. For some reason, I
Uh-huh.
felt the need to trot that thing out. I never thought about that to today. Kind of
Hmm.
in the environment I was in, it kind of felt like what you should do. And of course,
Uh-huh.
as soon as I left that organization, I don't know where it is right now. My diploma's someplace in his house, certainly not on
Yeah.
a wall, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's funny. It's funny when you surround yourself with people that are flashing accolades as their the thing that validates them, right? We almost feel propelled to push that out as well and do the same thing. I don't know what it is about human nature when it comes to that, but I guess keeping up with the Joneses at some point. But
and part of that, I also think there's we're getting far afield right now, but there's a tribal connection to a school, right? I think
yeah.
there's some. I think that's a good thing, right? People need to be connected to something, that community or
Hmm.
tribe or university, and you graduate, and there's an esprit de corps you get when you go to games together. This is all good stuff, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
But a lot of it is vanity. And I
Yeah.
tell you, being a parent of a kid too, living kind of an upper middle class life, there's a lot of vanity for parents to say, "Oh, I sent my kid to
X.
whatever
Yeah.
school they might be bragging about."
Yeah.
So sometimes I think it's for the parents' edification rather than kids to send them to someplace nice.
Yeah, and I have a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old, and I've told
Mhm.
them both. I said, look, I don't care if you go to school. If you go to school, I want you to focus on something that you want to do for the rest of your life. But here's the thing: the most important thing you're going to get out of that schooling is the people you're surrounding yourself, the networking that's going to come out of this. Because a lot of times, as young entrepreneurs or business people are coming out, they feel safe with the people that they have built a relationship with already. And they look to you to say, hey, I know this guy. I know his character. I know what he's about. I want to bring this guy in on my team. And you come in at the ground level with a lot of these guys. So you have the potential of
Yeah,
getting into something really big if you show character.
it's true. It's true. Also, this is a I didn't expect to talk about this, but the reality is, I know very few people end up staying in the field in which they have the degree,
Mm,
right? So, to me, it's like, get a degree, enjoy it,
hmm.
um, don't sweat it, and then realize that as your career evolves, as you find out where you've got giftedness in and where you have opportunity and passion, it might be something very different than your engineering degree or your business degree or your teaching
Hmm.
degree or whatever it might be,
Hmm.
right?
So, how did you get to be the very first journalistic plumber?
Well, I've never been called that. First, I can't plumb. I can write, but I can't plumb.
Okay.
I've never turned a wrench professionally in my life. But no, when I was coming out of school, I didn't know what to do. Right? There was no internships. I didn't do any of that. Just all of a sudden, I graduated, and oh gosh, I'm staring reality in the face now. Right?
Hmm.
So, my father had worked in the trade association business, and I never worked for my father. He lived in Chicago at the time. I was living in the Minnesota. But I knew there was an organization that trade association executives joined. And my father gave me the number of the guy that ran that. So I called him up and said, "Hey, I'm right out of college. I'm looking for some kind of opportunity here. Do you know anyone who's hiring?" So these would be, so if a trade association, that might be a member of this association of associations, had a job opening, they'd publicize it, right? He said, "I know one company, the Minnesota Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling Contractors Association. They're looking for an assistant executive director." So I went and interviewed. And again, they had 3 employees at the time. I was number 4, right? And
Hmm.
the current leader of the business was looking to retire in 4 or 5 years. So they were kind of looking for a successor. And so I interviewed, and 23 years old, I didn't know what I was doing. Honestly, Brandon, I had never turned on a computer. This is but businesses are starting to use them. I got through
Yeah.
college with a typewriter, right?
Yep.
This is back in the day, right?
Yep.
So they wanted somebody to help out. part of it was they had a monthly magazine, that they published that I'd be
Mhm.
the editor of, right?
Okay. Yeah,
Like a
yeah.
trade magazine, right?
Yes, sir. Uh-huh.
So, I think part of my journalism degree caught their eye, even though, I hadn't done anything other than write stuff for school. So they
Mhm.
hired me and,
Mhm.
came in. And it was a wonderful opportunity to learn, to basically do everything in a small company. It was a small trade association. I got to learn how to work with the board of directors. That was invaluable to me.
Mhm.
Obviously, I learned how to create a magazine, create content, sell advertising. You know, 4-person office, I did everything. I was the ad agency. I was the layout. I was the editorial director, you know,
Mhm.
did it all. And then
Mhm.
we were connected with the plumbers union, and then they
Mhm.
had a plumbers apprentice training program. So I got very involved in managing the committee that managed the training program, the instructors we hired, the curriculum, all that. So I
Mhm.
got to learn a lot about our industry, kind of from a distance, but a lot about it. And
Mhm.
in that time, we would do training programs for contractors. And I mentioned earlier in our conversation, a guy named Frank Blau, a very successful contractor in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, was out doing a business of contracting seminar. He had an article in Plum Mechanical Magazine, and he was trumpeting this cause that our industry was backwards, that it was being run by tradespeople that were great mechanics but didn't know how to run a business. And this has to change because it's creating poor work environments and poor opportunities for people and poor service for customers. So he was on a crusade. So I
Mhm.
hired him to come in and do a seminar for our member companies in Minnesota, and I got to know the man. He's about my age at the time, passionate, eccentric, brilliant, and he had run a successful company for 3 decades, way
Mhm.
more successful than anyone in our industry at that time. And it was all in the residential service business, home services.
Yes, sir.
He befriended me and he became a mentor of mine. And he had this idea to start this new organization that wouldn't focus on the traditional things trade associations at that time were focusing on, like code, licensing, there was almost like they were a trade guild, not a business development and training organization. And he wanted to
Mhm.
teach people the fundamentals of business. In his words, to turn the world's best mechanics in the world's best businessmen and women. He said, well, Jack, would you get this started for us?
Mhm.
So I had nothing to lose. I was making barely enough to keep my young family fed. And I remember when I accepted the job and I went in to quit my other job was the same day I took my wife home from the hospital after giving birth to our second child, Brent. I had a daughter, Lauren, at home, a young boy, Brent, and I dropped her off. This is, there was no paternity leave at this time. Paternity leave was taking time off to go get your wife at the hospital and bring her home, make sure she's okay,
Yeah.
and go back to work, right?
Yeah.
So none of that stuff that we get today, and I'm not being negative on it. I just kind of
Missed the
smile.
boat.
It wasn't even a thought, right?
Yeah, I didn't get that either, and
No,
I'm happy for the guys that get to spend a little time with their kids. It's a pivotal time in your life, but I didn't get it either.
no, I didn't get it. So I dropped her off, make sure she's okay, and then said, I got to go to work and quit. And I was stressed, man, because
Mhm.
that was burning the boat, right?
Mhm.
And a month later, we launched it formally, and it was a complete invention. This organization, it was a kind of a hybrid between a consulting organization and a trade organization. But
Mhm.
it was interesting when the message is right and the time was right, and we had the credibility of leaders like Frank Blau and George Brazil and others. Um, sure enough, it I won't say it caught fire, but it grew fast, and
What
it
do you
was the
think?
message that was needed.
What do you think is the number one thing that it was able to deliver that a lot of people out there were lacking?
Well, let's talk about the industry then, and
Okay.
I'm gonna sound like an old time historian here, but the typical business owner back in the '80s, early '90s was a mechanic. They're a
Mhm.
plumber, master plumber. In fact, in the state of Minnesota, as an example, you have to have a master plumber with a piece of ownership in the business, or at least they did at the time.
Mhm.
Master electrician, great HVAC mechanic. So they knew the trade. They just never had run a business, and they didn't come from an environment where they learned through observation how to run a great business. They might have run it with their father, who didn't know what he was doing either, or somebody else. The typical business then was maybe 3 people, an owner,
Mhm.
a couple of employees. If they were bigger, they might have maybe his wife in the office answering the phones, doing the books, right?
Mhm.
Charging time material, really focused on the craft. but didn't know how to run a business, didn't know how to read an income statement. Now, this
Mhm.
sounds ridiculous today, especially in our industry with, businesses doing hundreds of millions of dollars with, MBAs on staff, but that was not the case back then.
Mhm.
So the industry needed this. The owners needed this. This was kind of a college of knowledge for contractors. And so when we came out and said, here's a university of sorts that you can join to learn how to run a business better and network with other people that are ambitious and growth minded, well, it just worked. And then
Mhm.
we just went to work building it, right?
Yeah. So what you're saying is you had a bunch of people that were just hustlers that were out there, you know, chucking a truck and his wife, and they were, doing as much as they could handle business doing themselves, and they never really got to move outside of the role of active plumber, right? But they still would, bring
You
a
still
couple of
there?
people on, and they would head things up. Scalability was not there. The understanding of how to grow the business. Is that what you're
When
getting
you,
at?
yeah, well, yeah. Here's what was going on back then. They were just working their tail off
Mm-hmm.
and they weren't charging very much. So they're working long hours, making very little money, just making a living, you know, sacrificing their family and their free time on the altar of customer service and helping the industry or helping their customers.
Mm-hmm.
Customers are kind of being served, kind of. The employees weren't because there's no growth opportunities. And the owners, the people that own the business, really didn't have a life that was any better than their employees that they were hiring.
Mm-hmm.
So and all they knew is what they knew, right? So, they again, no college, you know, when you get a journeyman's license in our industry, they don't teach you how to run a business. They teach you the code. They teach you how to lay
Mm-hmm.
out plans. They teach you how to do the work, right? They don't teach you how to run a business that does the work. So you have these
Mm-hmm.
mechanics running a business. They're not dumb. They're just ignorant,
Yeah.
right? And we provided a forum in an organization to teach them how to become the world's best business people.
Mm-hmm. And so
And
the
it
number
worked.
one thing that someone's coming out with when they're jumping into this, um, you say we're teaching them how to become business people. Like, where are most people failing? Are they failing at
You talking
the
about
type
today?
of? Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right.
Like, if you go to build this and we're talking to the people that are out there listening for home services currently, right? If
Yeah.
you talk to somebody and they're trying to grow their business from 3 to 10 to 20 people, right? Where do you find out most people are failing in their business?
Okay. Well, I mean, it's a tough question now. If you'd have asked me that question years ago, I would have just said outright ignorance and improper pricing. That would have
Mm-hmm.
been my quick answer. I still think though that is the case today, but today I think it's a little more of a layered conversation. I think today, I think when you've decided, here's the thing that's evolved. Today, most companies realize you have to pick a sector: service replacement, new construction, commercial. It's very tough to run multiple business models under one roof. So
Mm-hmm.
that would have been a failing for people back in the day. And I still see that maybe today. Once you've picked that out, there's great software now with Service Titan and others, right? We didn't have that
Mm-hmm.
back, right? It was, back of the envelope stuff. So that's available now. So I can't lay on that. Marketing is much easier today than it would have been back then. Yet back then it was all yellow pages, which was tough.
Mm-hmm.
At a one-time decision, you're stuck with it for 15 months. Today, you can make daily decisions on spend. So marketing failure is not as important or not as prevalent today as it would have been back then. I think right now it comes down to an owner who will continue to grow their leadership and is able to attract and grow other leaders around them. That, to me, if I had to say what's the most important thing today, because of all the advances in our industry, from marketing to organizations like best practices like Nexstar to software like Service Titan to marketing evolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Comes down to leadership and attracting other leaders. It sounds vague, but gosh, is it important. You got to get that right. Otherwise,
What
you're
is
stuck.
some What is something that you look into when you're finding? Because I'm hiring people all the time right now as well. Not all the time, but I'm hiring people as well right now. And I look for something that really fits my culture for the type of person that I want. Someone who's driven, someone who's detail oriented, someone who
Yeah.
feels the dream the same way that I feel the
You
dream,
said two
right?
different things. You said two different things right there. Someone who's driven and detail orientated. Is that both those required
I would
in the same
say
person?
for where I'm at
For
currently,
you? Okay.
yeah, for where I'm at currently, I like those. That's the
Okay.
combination that I like. Yeah.
Very good.
Um, and so I really like to find people that have. Um, I know how I am. When I go to, I'm a visionary type person. Like I can go
Okay.
out
All
and
right.
pull things in, and so I surround myself with people who are super buttoned up, right? And so I know what it is that I'm looking for when that type of person. But I need people who are, trustworthy, loyal, um,
Mhm.
that believe in the dream too, right? Um, are you saying culture is the number one most important thing when you start to pick these people? And when I say culture, I mean people that believe like you believe, or people that represent your company the way that you would represent your company?
Well, your journey where you are sounds like my journey back in the day. I was the same thing. I was a big picture man. Um, had to cast a vision for the organization, had to sell, had to do a lot of other things. Never liked the detail.
Hmm.
I could do it. I had to. When you're
Yeah.
the first employee, you got to do it, right? And you've
Right.
got two employees. But I got to tell you, as soon as I could start hiring people, the first thing I delegated was the details. The
Yes.
very first thing I delegated. So that was a very important quality for me to surround myself with people that could keep, for lack of a better word, keep me organized. Right.
Hmm. Yeah. Correct.
So that's one thing. So as a hiring imperative, that was important to me growing a young organization. Now, as you grow an organization, you don't always hire that same skill set because you start to decentralize authority. Now you might want a sales leader. You might want a marketing leader, and they might be more big picture. Now,
Hmm.
they might need detail around them, right? So it kind of evolves. What I was talking about though is, leadership is being somebody who good people want to spend time with,
Hmm.
good talented people want to spend time with. The litmus test on leadership is when you have a really talented person that works for you. Are they proud to say they work for you?
Right.
Right? Here's my boss, Jack. I've heard people introduce their boss almost like they're embarrassed, like, here's the guy I work for. Right?
That's tough.
Right? And people don't, it's not that you've got to be, charismatic
Right.
or, a debonair guy. You have to
Hmm.
be, you have to have high character.
Hmm.
There's certain essential leadership competencies that you have to have, and you got to bring it every day.
Yeah.
Right? Those three things is what it is. And then you need to develop people that have those same qualities underneath you. Right? And when
Hmm.
you do that, you got a leadership pipeline. Now you can expand and grow. If you don't, now you're required to hire those people, find them. Right? And that's a crapshoot. Right?
Right.
You can grow them. You won't grow all of them. You got to hire from outside sometimes. But I tell you, the best companies figure out how to elevate and grow because they know them, they know their character, they know the culture, they know what you want. And when you hire from outside, especially a senior person, you do recruiting, all this stuff, you don't know.
Hmm.
You try to check background, you hire recruiters, you
Hmm.
do the best job you can. And a lot of times you hit a home run. A lot of
Hmm.
times you don't, right?
Yeah. Swing and a miss.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's been the thing for me too. Is like I think uh, finding people who are hungry, finding people who, kind of want to push, like that. Like I can always, water something and give those type of, um, uh, support to people who are looking to, build a career. A lot of times you get somebody in who is, more established. I mean, they have their way of doing things, and it's,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of push and pull.
There is. There is.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want somebody that, I heard a saying years ago. I don't know where I heard it. It says that, I'd rather hold back a thoroughbred than kick a mule. And I think about that. It's a really cool way to view it, right? Like, rather he take somebody who's got a lot of ambition, a lot of drive, a lot of energy, and say, kind of hold them back a little bit. Like, oh, maybe not right now. Let's go a little slower. Versus like, hey, what have you done lately? Come on, get moving, right? I
Hmm.
always hated that. I always hated metaphorically kicking someone in the back to get them moving, right?
Right.
Demeaning, right?
Yeah. And as we, I just talk about the building blocks of bringing teams together, right? Because that's one of the things we had talked about as being the most important or the foundational part of building your team. It's only going to grow as good as the people you put around you, correct?
Yeah, it's true,
Yeah.
especially in my business. Yeah, I think it's
Right.
not true for all businesses, but I certainly know home services, and that's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you jump into, the next part about this is like, what are the layers of foundation that need to start with, building this company, right? Do I need to first off think about cogs and things that go with that nature of how much is my company taking from me versus how much is it putting back in? Is the juice worth the squeeze, basically? Or like, what are the foundational pillars that you tell people? Hey, once you start to think about your company, it can grow when X.
Hmm. Well, when you said pillars, I thought about the three pillars of the business. I thought
Okay.
about operations, finance, and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you've got to have excellence in those three areas. So I think, as you start to build out a business, you got to say to yourself, all right, most companies start, if they're started by a salesperson or a big picture person, they might be very good at marketing
Mm-hmm.
and they might not be really good at delivering or keeping track of the numbers. If you're a finance person who starts a business, you'll probably be very good at the number side, you know, keeping that button down. Or if you're a plumber or an operations person, you might be good here, but not good at selling or marketing or finance. So I would ask you to probably self-evaluate and say, where are you excellent? Kind of where do you have a natural giftedness? And then how do
Mm-hmm.
you surround yourself with other people, other centers of excellence in those other two areas to make sure that, because you can't do it all well. It's a very rare person. It happens,
Mm-hmm.
right? A very rare person that's really good at all three of those things. And then as the business scales and grows, you can't pay attention all three areas. When you're small, you can.
Mm-hmm.
But as you grow it, you can't. So you have
Mm-hmm.
to decide, and in my case, I wasn't a finance person, so I had to find excellence there. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm pretty good at operations and was pretty good at sales, not a great marketer. So then I decided to kind of grow that part away from me and stayed more
Mm-hmm.
in operations longer than I probably needed to, but probably where I felt the most equipped.
That's funny that you say that because at the beginning of the story, you talked about journalists, which I would think marketing in general, right? But then you've talked about a couple other journeys you went through, and you just said I was probably the best at sales. You know, the self evaluation of finding out this may not be the thing that I've got the most training in, may not be the thing that I'm the best at, and
Yeah.
then giving and then handing to someone else, what you thought you loved as your baby.
Yeah. I guess that's true. I haven't thought about it, I guess, but, as I've reflected on myself, I find myself naturally gravitating to operations and sales and naturally moving away from today's marketing. Let's call it that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Just more complex, more going on. Sometimes it seems a little ethereal, like,
Mm-hmm.
when we make a mistake, it's not a mistake, it's a learning. Always piss me
Mm-hmm.
off, right? Um, so, so I just said,
Yeah.
look, let's hire some people that can do that over there. And then I complain to them. So,
Yeah. When you guys have had marketing companies, have you had them in house? Because I think a lot of people are starting to build companies or using outsourcing their marketing and then they start to bring it indoors. Have you done what side of that have you done?
both. I think smaller, again, it was less complex, more simple. I did it in the early days of Nexstar. It was
Mm-hmm.
Lulz and Jack, right?
Mm.
Um, then we started to bring in some internal people that would manage some vendors. Today, if I think about a bigger, more diverse home service company today, they might have a half a dozen vendors that they're
Mm-hmm.
working with, from purchasing to creative to digital, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a much more complex thing. I don't know that one company, I'm talking about a home service company now, could have the internal capabilities to do it all well. But you certainly need somebody that can sniff out the BS with marketers and manage the activity for you. You've got to have a
Mm-hmm.
talented person in there. And sometimes that's
Mm-hmm.
the owner, because I've seen a lot of owners over time, they gravitate to marketing, right? And they don't
Yeah.
necessarily do it, but they enjoy it, right? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and the company I'm with right now, Eco in Ohio, our owner is very good at marketing, and he still doesn't do it, but he's very involved. And
Mm-hmm.
I think he's quite good at it.
Yeah. The same way like Brad Bacon that you had talked about earlier. I do a lot of his marketing. And so I see he's very involved in some of those things. Like he wants to know the pulse of where it is. He understands the way the market works, and quite frankly, I've done this for a long time, but I'm learning some things from his industry and from the things that he's done that
I, bet-
have, really worked out over time through the home industries, home
I, bet-
services side of it.
I bet you are. I bet you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he'll jump into keeping his pulse on how he sees the brand go in a certain way or whatever, right? So everyone has
Yeah.
uh, their vision of what this thing wants to be, as
Yeah.
it starts to go. That nobody really wants to let go of that.
No, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Marketing is where a lot of owners end up. Yeah, I've seen that in Nexstar. A lot of them end up over there kind of helping out or overseeing, right?
Mm-hmm. When you get into things like operations for companies, right? We talk about the funnel all the time of, how jobs come in to how they get answered, to how they get booked, to how they get ran, to how they get closed at the end of the day. And the operations through that. What is the best way for a company? What is the number one thing they should look to? Because again, there's a difference between picking the phone up at the smallest level. You got, a mom and pop, right? They pick the phone up, they take a call, they call the husband, say, hey, go to this address, they need X, and then they run, right? To when it's a bigger organization, they're fielding hundreds of calls a day, thousands of calls a day, running those through, booking calls, putting those on a lead board, a 3-day lead board, and then making sure those are all parsed out to their techs and, running the most valuable calls at the beginning all the way down through what's available, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes down to, getting the tech out there, getting it closed. Where does somebody begin to make that journey? There's such a wide gap between those companies that have all of this stuff set up. But
Yeah.
when mom and pop says, man, I need to grow and I need to do something, what's the first thing they need to jump in to do? Like, where do they need to begin? How do they get out of their rut of, I'm too busy answering calls and sending John to go run to even start to build this franchise?
God, that's a big question. I'm trying to think back to those days, and we always said with an embryonic business that the first thing the owner had to figure out how to do was to get out of the truck. We always said that, right? Because if you're out running calls, if you're out running sales calls, if you're out doing installations, you don't have the time to devote to running the business. So therefore, the first thing you have to replace is what you're doing in the field. And oftentimes that's their love, because they're great mechanics. They're great tradespeople, right? They enjoy, and they're the best. I've seen a lot of owners that just could not do this because they couldn't suffer any work that was anything less than what they would have personally done. And they were craftsmen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I get it, but they're also their own worst enemy, right? So that's where you have to start, I think. We always said that, get out of the truck, figure out how to hire and replace yourself in the field and start there. Now you can sit in the office and now you can watch the rest of the business. You can watch the call center, you can watch dispatch, and you can be involved and do those roles for a period of time until you can hire someone and start to offload. Kind of, if you visualize the work that you do, visualize an org chart. Okay, top is the owner. They've got managers all the way down to a helper and a CSR. I'm not minimizing those positions, but there's kind of a hierarchy of an org chart. And then put your name in these boxes. Metaphorically speaking, I answer the phones, I dispatch the calls, I do. The lowest task you have on that org chart, try to replace that the first and move your way up this chart. Does that make sense? To move your way up the org chart. So that's how you kind of got to start doing it. And it's, I guess the journey's different. Also, you got to say, what are your giftedness, right? For me, I was doing everything in the org chart in the early days of Nexstar, every single job. And I said, what can I hire that's better than I can do, right? Or the lowest level thing. It was admin work. It was meeting planning. This is not meaningless stuff, but it's detailed, time-consuming things, the things that I don't enjoy, I'm not particularly gifted at. So you kind of get rid of those first too. Does that help?
Oh, that's great. Honestly, like I would love for you to keep going up that ladder, honestly, because
you just go up the ladder, right? There's an org chart, you write it out.
Yeah.
This industry has them now. Nexstar sure does. Here's what a business should be structured at, and you can put a name in every box and see how many names how many boxes your name's in, and just start to eliminate those boxes with somebody else, and just slowly work on it. And it doesn't take. You don't do this in a month. This might be a 5-year journey, right?
That's actually really interesting to think about. Getting the things off the bottom shelf first,
Yeah.
and get those kind of disseminated to somebody else,
Yeah.
so you can start to focus on the things at the top level. It's kind of like the old adage of how do you fill a jar up with the rocks? You put the biggest rocks in first, and then the
Hmm.
smallest rocks, and then the smallest rocks after that, right? To get it out of the way, like you take care of the more important things and let some of the smaller things come
Yeah.
last. If you can get that taken care of by someone else,
Yeah.
um, then you're able to, move more business, do more calls, do more things.
What's interesting,
Okay.
what you said about yourself, finding a detailed person, maybe without putting in those words, that's what you're doing. When
Yeah.
you said, I got to hire a detailed person in my agency, right? You're without thinking that, without necessarily putting in the words, you're doing the same thing. And of course, that's what I did back in the day. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I did it, right?
hmm
And upon reflection, as you talked about, you look back, oh, pretty smart. No, pretty lucky.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, and getting those people um, that are, devoted to the same mission that you are, is great because we lift each other up. There's no, like you said earlier, no person can do this thing by
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah.
You surround yourself with the type of people that you support each other, and you take off each other's strengths, and you start to move up as a group,
Yeah.
right? I think, like you said, not the admin work is menial by any stretch.
No,
It's probably the most important thing because it's what makes the flywheel run.
that's right. Yeah.
Um,
It's not demeaning it. You got to do it. It's
mhm.
got to be done at a high level, right?
Yeah.
And of course, then, the thing you got to ask yourself when you start hiring these folks, and you got to ask yourself all the time, is why should they do it other than a paycheck?
hmm
Why you want passionate people? What are they passionate about? Why should they be passionate about your agency? I'm not challenging you here. I'm just asking the question, right? People have to have a purpose beyond the paycheck to be
hmm
extraordinary at work. And part of it is their own makeup. Part of it is their own, ambition, right? But
hmm
you got to give them a higher reason.
hmm
I can't tell you how many times I've met owners and I've said to myself, I wouldn't walk across the street for that man or woman. I wouldn't work
Right.
hard for them. I don't want to
hmm
enrich them. In fact, I quit a job once because I didn't want to enrich the person that I would be working for because I found him
Right.
so repulsive.
Right.
And so this goes back to that leadership question, right? You got
hmm
to it, make it, make it matter. What's the
hmm
purpose of the business? What are you building together? Why? What greater good are you accomplishing in the world? And of course, you can do this in home services because we're doing great work for people. Talking
hmm
about homeowners, right? And
hmm
you got to lean into that, but it's also a little bit more than that. So you got to really find a purpose, and then you get an ambitious person that's got talent. Now they got a reason why. Now it gets a little
hmm
easier, right? It's
Yeah.
all that leadership question.
I always say that I want to show respect to the person that has given me the opportunity to take a portion of their life and work with me. I have a great responsibility, I feel like, to that person. I mean, they're literally dedicating, everyone's got sand falling through the hourglass, right?
No,
And they're giving me that many granules of sand to work with, right? I need to show them respect and say thank you for
yeah,
dedicating your time to me, right? So out of that thank you needs to be like, how can I grow you? Talk to you all the time. Where do you want to go? Where do you see this company going? And what would fulfill you in your part of it, right? And if there's something that would really make you happy in your job, where can we, fill that in? That may not be all of your job, but let's find
yeah,
a gap or something to try to fill with, like, how can we grow you? How can we make sure that
yeah,
you're happy and staying driven the same way, right?
yeah. Makes sense. I agree. That's a nice way to view it. You are taking part of their life. In fact, the truth of the matter is, they'll spend more time with you if you work together for 8 hours a day. They'll spend more time with you than they will with their partner, right? Their
I have,
children.
I'm laughing now because I've got, someone in the office with us right now that's worked with me for 5 or 6 years, and I've used that exact line, I don't know, ad nauseum too many times, but I really believe that.
Yeah,
Like, how much time, think about it, how much time a day do you get to spend with your wife?
yeah,
Well, not you specifically right now, but the average person that's working, right? Like, how much time in a day does the average person get to spend with their family? Because you go home, you're going to get, 2 hours to, between cooking, doing chores, and getting ready for bed. There's 2 to 3 hours in that thing. And then you're going to sleep for 8. And then you're
yeah.
going to get up and go to work for 8,
Right.
9, 10, 12, whatever. So you spend more time with us than
Yeah.
you do for the people you're actually providing for,
You
right?
do. You do. Yeah, and it's so if you think about that, leadership is a solemn responsibility, right?
Mhm.
One to make it valuable, and
Mhm.
and this is an eye beholder, but you gotta make it enjoyable. It doesn't have to be fun, in a
Mhm.
hilarity kind of a way. It just has to be fulfilling,
Mhm.
and you people have to enjoy. I've been so fortunate that I've got jobs that I've enjoyed Monday as much as I enjoy Saturday, right? And that's a great way to view it. Do they look forward to Monday? Not, maybe not the same as Saturday, because I like to golf, I like to hang
Yeah.
out, or go bird hunting. I like all this other stuff that probably I
Yeah.
like a little bit more than putting on the
Going
boots
to
and
work.
going to work. But still,
Yeah.
I don't hate Monday,
Yeah.
and that's the way to live, right?
Mhm.
And we kind of owe it, and we can't make everyone happy, right? There's some people that are just miserable, but if we
Mhm.
create an environment that is high integrity, got good momentum,
Mhm.
and comfortable to be in,
Mhm.
comfortable being, respectful,
Mhm.
fun, maybe at times, right? Um, I think we have to do that as leaders. I think we just have to do that.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're cruel,
Right.
right? You're just being cruel,
Yes.
you're being selfish, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't like
Well,
that.
I think we talk about culture quite a bit here, and I really feel like that's the main part of every company is the culture. And I think you will grow. You put out a good product, and you have good people around you, you will grow. Like
Yeah.
that's just part of it, right? But outside of culture, when most people start to say they're missing on something, what's the next thing that most people are missing on? Is it people unable to balance the books? Is it people unable to forecast correctly? Is it like where's a big loophole that people really need to try to, sew up for the most part?
Boy, I don't know if I have an answer. Let me reflect on that for a minute because, culture is nothing more than the most common behaviors and words that are
Mhm.
spoken in a given company. So,
Mhm.
words and behaviors create results. So,
Mhm.
I would go back, and culture is just this huge, almost an abused, overused word these days, right? That we
Yeah,
talk
a
about all the
catch-all.
time, right? But you know, I don't know that I can answer that as like if it's the books or if it's I would go back if a business is missing. Um, I have to go back to the senior leaders first and say, give me a day in the life. Let me understand how they're thinking. Let me understand where they're putting their energy and where they're not putting their energy. Let's start at the top of the org chart, not the bottom of the org chart. And let's see if we can't discern the gap from that conversation and that analysis. Let's start there because it's, I don't know that I have the answer otherwise, because whether it's a training
Mhm.
issue, whether it's a process breakdown, whether it's a lead flow issue, whether it's inaccurate, untimely financials, whether it's lack of discipline in the way they spend, um, whether it's, these are things that are kind of outside of the other things. Um,
Mhm.
Boy, that's a tough one. I don't know that I can give a generic answer to that I'd feel good about,
Mhm.
convicted about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, yeah, as you start talking about these companies that are wanting to expand, wanting to,
Mhm.
there's common thresholds of people, and I feel like everyone's going to have some similar hiccups or similar problems or hurdles they have to face. Um, but getting to the point where someone knows, hey, look, I've done it to this point, I've gotten to this. This means it's time for me to level up because a lot of people get scared to make the next jump.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And
yeah.
so I guess what I'm really trying to ask is I want to give some security to some people to feel like for someone who has done it like you've done it. When did you know like, all right, now's a good time to hit the gas because we've done X, because we got $7 in the bank, or because we've whatever the threshold is there. Like, what are some good key indicators to let somebody know, like, hey, now's time to hit the gas?
Well, I can speak from a little bit. I was thinking, how did we do that? And I don't know that we had a playbook for it, but, um, for Nexstar, our primary statistic was retention,
Mm.
and meaning the
Hmm.
percentage of people that stayed with us 1 year to the next. And we focused on that stat as a senior stat. And when we were doing well there, we knew we were doing well, right?
Mm.
Our services were good. And then below that statistic, we had coaching and training and strategic partners and some other revenue streams that came in. And, when we find that we had a coaching service that was really taking hold, we double down on it, hire somebody
Mhm.
else, right? It's kind of
Mhm.
like, the old metaphor that Jim Collins has used in his books. You shoot BBs and then you hit your target and then you shoot a cannonball. And I think that's kind of what you do in business. You try a variety of different things. And sometimes, what's interesting. I have great conviction when it's my idea in particular. I think it's going to
Mhm.
work
Mhm.
and I will get after it. And it's surprising how often I'm wrong.
Mhm.
Right? I shoot a BB, hopefully not a cannonball. And geez, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm right. And then when I
Yeah.
am right, it's like now you double down. It's like and I don't, I'm not a big blackjack player, but when you get the right hand, you kind of split it, and add to it. I don't know what hell I'm talking about right now, but because I've done it a few times, but it's kind of what you do in
Mhm.
business. That hey, this kind of worked, right? We started the service line. It's sewer repair, and my goodness, what happens if we doubled our budget on stoppage calls? And what happens
Mhm.
if I hired two more salesmen? And now instead of having one and three, I got 6 and 8 and you're just
Mhm.
kind of doubling down on that thing, right?
Mhm.
It's kind of way I view it. So in business, you try a variety of different things, and once you find that mark, yeah, it's kind of like you go all in. And I will say this too. So back to Nexstar, right? 85%. Um, you know, yeah, that's well. I'll just leave it there. I had another thought, but I don't think it's going to apply here. So leave it there.
Well, I think, I wanted to hit the retention thing. I think that's a big deal. Like you said, retention was your number one thing. That meant you were doing well in your service area. What is that statistic? Percentage of retention. Like you want 80% of our employees to stick around for X amount of time. Like
Yep.
what statistic are you looking at to validate that retention?
Well, the retention for us was the amount of members that stayed 1 year to the next. Some who
Okay.
like basically be like in your case clients, right?
Okay.
That they continue to use you once. So if you had 10 to start the year and you had 9 to end the year, your retention is
Hmm.
90%, right? You can
Okay.
do the same. What's that?
You meant customer retention, not
That's right.
employee retention.
Uh, uh,
Okay.
No, we did them both, but the senior number was was customer retention. And I think that's a great number for any business to look at because it tells you if what you're offering is valued by people. Now you might have a different retention cycle. If you're just a demand service plumber, you might say, look, if they haven't used me in a year, doesn't mean they don't hate me. They just haven't had a plumbing need that I haven't been able to
Hmm.
activate. Right. So you gotta look at what your stat is, but you want it to be growing, right? You want it to be
Hmm.
getting better, whatever you're
Hmm.
tracking. So I think
Hmm.
retention is a huge number, right? Of whatever kind of company you're running is, you don't want a one-off transaction with a customer. You want a relationship with a customer. We would not allow anyone in Nexstar, I didn't, to call
Hmm.
a member a client or a customer.
Hmm.
No, they're a member, right? Then there's a whole different mindset when you say they're a member versus a customer. Customer buys,
Hmm.
a member you have a relationship with. And that's what we wanted, right? So we just talked it.
Hmm.
And over time, you didn't even have to enforce it. It just happened, right? That's
Yeah.
how we thought about it, right? And I think that's a good model even for a non-membership based company, whether it's a home service business or somebody else is, you know, think about them as a relationship, right?
Hmm.
Not a client.
Is there a percentage of members you should be growing every year by number of jobs ran or like?
I don't have it. There is one. I don't
Yeah.
have it. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I think you just got to create your baseline in a
Okay.
company. You just say, where are we?
Uh huh.
Your best competition is yourself.
Hmm.
Just trying to better yourself next year. So
Hmm.
often people get all wound up looking at what competitors do
Yeah.
and what others in their space are doing, and they kind of get a little Me Too-itis, and you can Me Too your way right to hell if you're not careful.
Yeah.
So just get better. One of the beautiful things, and I think this happens over time when you become confident, is you stop looking so much at what others that might be quote unquote competitors are doing, and you start to create your own future. Meaning you don't do
Mm.
Me Too. You don't say they're doing it, therefore I should do it. you start to say, you're close enough to your customers to understand what they want and how you're serving them. You're close enough to your business to understand what your capabilities are. And then you start to make a whole different level of decisions, which is about what they need, what you want to do, not what somebody else is forcing you to do or thinking you should do. You got to watch your
Mm-hmm.
competition. You got to be out there because sometimes they really will invent something that's pretty cool that you want to
Mm-hmm.
watch. But if you're trying to copycat this world, it's no fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
You kind of feel diminished when you do it too, by the way.
Yeah.
I've done it. You kind of like, I kind of feel dirty and I don't really enjoy it. And versus
Mm-hmm.
innovating internally, right?
Yeah.
That's
There's a
cool.
lot of there's a lot of times you can chase somebody down a rabbit hole too. To this, hey, we're doing this service for $99. Oh, we're doing it for $79. Or we're doing it for $59. Or we're doing it for $39. And next thing you know, like as a company, you're not making any money whatsoever just because you're trying to beat your competition to something. Knowing your threshold and finding out where that limit is to be profitable, it's probably pretty good to be that chess move to stop where you know it's profitable. Because if they do undercut you, then they're going to be losing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. You gotta know your costs. That was the first principle in Nexstar is that
Mm-hmm.
prices aren't based on what the competition's charging. That was one of the reasons our industry sucks so bad. Is that
Mm-hmm.
this guy's charging $55 an hour, so I'll charge 50,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you got your selling prices, and they'll have some promotional items, but your selling prices, the core of your business, the price of it has to be a reflection of what it costs you to do the business, not what a competitor might be willing to charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because you can't, that's not the way to live.
Let them drag you down with them.
Well, yeah, it's a race to the bottom, right?
Yeah.
And so often, let's go back, right? You don't, this competitor, let's just say it, who's got this lower price thing or you're trying to compare yourself to, they might be a raging idiot running
Mm-hmm.
their business, right? You just don't know. Why
Mm-hmm.
would you let them set the tone in your own business? You
Mm-hmm.
know, let's innovate, let's create, let's be a leader, let's decide. Let's not be clueless, but let's set our own course rather than let somebody who I don't even know, don't even like, do it for me. That doesn't make any
Mm-hmm.
sense, right? And
Yeah,
then you
make
got to
you
be
chase.
careful because your salespeople will force you. Hey, we should be doing this. They'll come and bring you all kinds of dire warnings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're not paying the bills, right?
Yeah, they're not the one with their foot caught in a bear trap when you've chased somebody else all the way down a rabbit hole and at the end of the day you've made both your companies unhealthy.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate their feedback, but you can't lunge at it. That's what I'm basically saying is you can't overreact to it. And you never
Yeah.
make them happy either. But that's a
Yeah,
whole
you
other
just got to
whole other podcast.
find out what the service costs, find
Yeah.
out what you can do as a good service, and then find out where your company stays healthy at. And then that's your baseline. Your baseline is not what somebody else is doing. Your baseline is what's the best value for the customer and
Right.
how can I stay healthy doing this?
That's right.
That's the true number, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That is. And
When you
I tell
got
you, if
it,
you watch your conversion, the new customers that you convert, you'll get a pretty good idea. If you're not converting very many, then you have to look at yourself and say, what am I doing wrong? It might be a sales
Mhm.
issue, might be an offering issue, maybe a price issue. I don't know. In our industry,
Mhm.
it usually isn't, but might.
Mhm. When you went through Nexstar, how long were you with Nexstar?
Let's start at 92, worked there till the end of 98, left for 7 years, came back in 2006 and fully retired from Nexstar in September of 2023. So however many years that is, it's a lot.
It's a lot of years, a lot of experience,
It is.
a lot of knowledge. And then after Nexstar, you jumped over and you wanted to retire fully, or
Well, no, I'm not that old, but I is when I decided to retire as a CEO, Nexstar was in a good spot. It was really doing well, and there's a shelf life on a leader, and I don't know what it is, but I did say to myself, look, I've seen leaders that hung around too long, and it's not a good look. And I wanted to be the first to know it was time for me to step away from leadership rather than the last to know. And I just felt, the Nexstar was in a good spot. I thought there was a good leader that could take my place, good guy named Julian. And I could see he was getting ready. And I kind of had an itch.
Mhm.
Running a business is a big responsibility. It takes a lot of time. takes a lot of time up here. I'm pointing to my head right now
Mm.
as you're listening to this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I wanted space. I wanted, there's some time I missed with my wife and my adult children that I just wanted to be available, even though they don't need me, but just wanted to be available, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like to hunt, like to fish, want to do a little bit more of that. There's a weight of leadership, and it's a beautiful weight, but it's a heavy weight. And at a certain point, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, what would it be like without that? So I decided to step away as the CEO. Let my board know a year ahead of time. So we made a plan, and they asked me to stay on, and I wanted to for 2 additional years as just kind of an advisor, just to be
Mm-hmm.
available to the board and to Julian and to others. I stayed on, did some leadership coaching, some leadership training for Nexstar for our members. Found I really kind of enjoyed that too. That was a pretty cool deal. We created a leadership curriculum that I was involved with and kind of enjoyed getting out there in the world and got a second wind in my career doing some training and coaching. And then,
Mm-hmm.
but then, there is a time where the former leader needs to step away from a business where, it's just the right thing to do for the leader and I'm talking about the former leader, me, and for the current regime. And, and I don't know when that time is, but it felt right for me that, I wanted to do other things, but I also wanted the organization not to feel tethered to me in any way. So I decided it was time for me to fully retire and did that. And I had a good friend, Aaron Gaynor, who was one of our members, that just said, hey, would you consider coming on board and just kind of helping us on a part-time level? Just sit on a senior leadership team meetings, maybe do some leadership training for our people, help grow some leaders, help us make better decisions. And so in September of 2023, I did that on a part-time level, and I very much enjoyed that. Still involved, but don't have to get in my truck at 5:30 in the morning and drive to work anymore. So
Yeah.
on a
Yeah.
cold
And
summer
so
day.
and so you got home, you started, relaxing, hanging out a little bit more with the family and doing, like you said, being available. Well, I wonder about this sometimes when it comes to people who are driven, who are, visionary type people, right?
Mhm.
How long did that last before that itch started to come back?
I still have this. I'm still involved. So, the fight you have is this is a different one. When you're a CEO in a publicly viewed company like Nexstar, people knew who we were, at least in our space, kind of a big fish in a little pond. You're relevant. And people know who you are.
Mhm.
There's a little ego to that. And then now you're not. And, the fear you may have is to lose relevancy, right?
Mhm.
That's it. And it's more of an ego thing, but
Mhm.
that crept into your mind a little bit. But you kind of have to say to yourself, look, I willfully stepped away from this. I could have
Mhm.
stayed. I decided something different. And there's, so I can view the things I've lost, some pay, I don't make as much money as I used to. That was pretty cool. Right. Um, right. Um,
Yeah.
some of the the fulfillment that you get, but I gave up that. I also go, what did I gain from this? I lost some
Mhm.
of that weight of responsibility that I had, that expectation day to day. You know, this industry is going through transformation, and one of the things I realized is there's. I think it's good. I always knew I was going to be had a short fuse. I was going to retire, and what happens when you're close to that is you don't think 10 years out. You start to think in 6-month increments, and that's not healthy for an organization either, right? So you got to
Mm.
think what's best for the organization, not just you. What do you want? But
Right.
what's best for the organization? So I can view the things that I miss, but I also think you got to do what's right, for the
Mm.
organization. And when you do that, it usually turns out best for you too, right?
Mhm.
So
Is
I
that's
never had a
Go ahead.
time where I didn't work.
Mhm.
I wasn't like retired for 6 months and then said, oh crap, golf's not enough. You
Yeah.
know, I never did that. I mean,
Yeah.
I stepped away from Nexstar, went fishing in Canada for a week, came back and flew to Ohio to get onboarded and help this company. So
Hmm.
I never had that big gap of time.
So you still have something to kind of keep you engaged,
Mhm.
keep you, it's not near what it was being the
No,
CEO of the other company, but
no.
it's just enough to be engaged a little bit, kind of get a little bit of that taste and continue to move forward with, because we all know golf is that good, right?
Golf's great, but it keeps your blade sharp. It keeps you engaged. And this is going to sound egotistical. I don't mean it to be. I've seen a lot. I've done a
Mhm.
lot. I've been through business cycles. I've been through a failed consolidator. I've been through an embryotic organization to a successful organization. I've transitioned out of leadership. I've got a lot to offer still, right? So, I want to do that, and I feel grateful that people want to still listen, right? And I
Mhm.
want to help. And the thing about what I'm doing now is you still got to earn it every day, right?
Mhm.
You know, the old Nexstar diploma behind me. I don't have one, but if I did, there's an expiration date on that too. You can only point to that for so long. You got to make
Mhm.
you got to make it, you got to add value all the time, and
Mhm.
that's all good, right? That's just how it is. I'm very fortunate to be able to be the career I've had and I'm having in the work I get to still do.
Mhm. Well, let's talk about the next phase, as you start going through things. Do you think you'll ever completely jump back into it like you did, or you kind of on pace for where you think you're settled into right now?
I think I enjoyed operating. I really enjoyed the grind. You know, there was no, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I did. But this is good too. There's a certain point where you become more of a mentor and a coach, than a doer. And I think at a certain age that you become more valuable there than you were over here, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know that I'll ever go back to a 60-hour, 50-hour, you know, thing like that. I'm not sure that appeals. I like being an advisor, I like being a board
Mhm.
member. I like doing this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And I can see there's, I don't have an end in mind, but we'll see. You just never know. And, when you get to be my age, I'm not that old, but, sometimes health makes a decision for you, right? You can,
Mhm.
you can make big plans and, you just got to, you just never know, right?
Yeah, I asked this question because I've interviewed MLB players and NFL players or whatever, and I always ask them like, what do you do to itch the scratch for competition? Now that you are no longer in baseball, now you no longer in football, like that side of you doesn't go away. Like you
Yeah.
still have to be competitive at something, whether it be chess or video games or cornhole in the backyard or whatever it is. Like you never let go of that, competition side of things. So what do you do to fill the gaps when it comes to that? And that's why I ask you the same question is like, there's something very enriching and fulfilling in your life of driving something to a certain point,
Yeah.
getting it grown and watered and running well oiled.
Yeah. There is. Well, here's the thing you can make a transition to is at a certain, yeah, I was the puppet master at Nexstar for a lot of years, right? And I have great fulfillment over that. And at a certain point, you've got to get fulfillment helping someone else be the puppet master of a
Mhm.
business, helping somebody else do that, and getting excited about that. Not you don't have to do it. You got to help them do it, right? And that's leadership, right? It's not
Mhm.
being the man. It's
Mhm.
helping somebody else have the career that I had. If I could mentor somebody and help them like Frank Blau helped me, and others too have helped me over the years. If I can do that and then realize I had a hand in it, not point it out, not put the spotlight on me, but realize I had a hand in that. Maybe a small hand, maybe not a lot, but
Mhm.
some. That's fulfilling too, right?
Mhm.
So you have to make a transition. I think. Well, pardon me. You don't have to. I felt I had to, right?
Mhm.
Just make a transition. Now, the difference between you're interviewing a ball player whose career ends at 34
Yeah.
versus me at 63 is a little different, right? I'm not
Yeah.
talking as a 34-year-old. I had a very different conversation if I would have cashed out at 34
Mhm.
and said, now what?
Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
exactly.
Right. Now I'm 40 years from, I don't have any grandkids, but
Mhm.
there's none of that either. Right. So,
Mhm.
um, it's I don't know. It's a journey everyone faces, but I'll tell you, a lot of my friends at Nexstar are in the same position I am. They've sold their business. They've transitioned, and they're all grappling with that existential question: what am I doing now? Right?
When you talk about that next person that comes behind that, you said that you're mentoring when it's time for you to step out, but you're going to, like you said, there was a leader that came behind you,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Did you expect that leader to make decisions like you made, or are you trying to coach them to think like you thought,
I do.
or are you trying to get them to think about the business? Because how you handle things differently as leaders will be vastly different.
Yeah. No, I think it's both. I think, you got to make sure you inculcate what the purpose of the business is, what the mission of the business is, why it was founded, who it's here to
Hmm.
serve. Make sure that we keep that as our North Star. And that's not up for debate. I'm not going to, this is a my way, your way thing. No, you gotta share that and feel good that they're aligned there. And then I think it's important as a leader, as you make decisions, to share why you did.
Hmm.
You want them to on some level, I don't say think like you. You're not trying to make because that's impossible to make a copycat. But I think it's important for them to understand the context by which you decide things. I think that's an important conversation to have with a leader because it helps to grow their thought leadership. Now,
Hmm.
ultimately, I don't like an organization that zigs and zags with the leader. Jack's running it and they're way over here to the right, and somebody else comes in and they just completely change. If that's going on, the business must be in a free fall. But if it's not, why? And so you have to
Hmm.
have. I think that there's got to be an element of continuity. Now, over time, their personality, their on some level, their values, there can't be a big divergence of values though.
Hmm.
Takes over, right? They might have, going back to our conversation, they might have a predisposition to spend more time in marketing, or
Hmm.
a predisposition to spend more time in the public atmosphere, being out in the industry. Just they
Hmm.
seem to enjoy that. You know, so they'll show up a little bit different. But I think back to your question, I think you've got to have real conversations about mission and purpose of the business, values that you have in leadership, making sure there's alignment there because that can't change. I don't
Hmm.
think, you can't have somebody that I value integrity and the next leader doesn't. No, it doesn't work. Right.
Yeah, everybody you've built your team around is built to model that. You've handpicked people that also value those things, and they
Yeah,
have signed up with you as a company because they value them as
that's right.
well, right?
Yeah, I tell you, leadership change is hard on people, right? Sometimes at the very top of the organization, you're running a business, and for you business owners, please listen hard to this. You haven't had a new boss in a decade, and you're flipping the org chart around, and you're changing things, and you're doing this, that, and the other thing, and you forget that there's someone on the other side of that. And when you get a new boss, it's different. It can be wonderful, it can be shitty, right? And you can't underestimate the difficulty and how challenging it is for an employee that continually gets a new supervisor. It's tough. We got to
Mm-hmm.
remember that. Not that we don't
Hmm.
change because of it, but we just have to remember, be empathetic, and make sure we're doing a good job of selection here. Because I
Hmm.
tell you what, if you think about the third most important person in your life after your partner and your children, should you have either one of those, it's your boss. You know?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
true.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It is.
It's just that was a heavy one that you just kind of threw right there, and so
Well, here I am.
more responsibility you just threw on the
Yeah.
shoulders.
Don't bump me out, Brandon, but you better up your game, brother. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm on it.
I'm teasing.
Um, so now that you've gotten through those stages, like let's talk about what do you do for the fun stuff nowadays. Let's talk about this golf game I keep hearing about.
Yeah. I've um I love to play golf. I do. It's that does it's golf's a competitive game. You're competing against yourself, right? I don't
Hmm.
play a lot of money games. I'm not a big money game guy. Yeah, but
Hmm.
I keep score.
Hmm.
I like it when I can shoot low. I
Yeah.
like to hit greens in regulation. I track that stuff, right?
Yeah.
how many three putts I did or didn't have, right? I enjoy that. So and golf's a fascinating game because you never master it. It's like business. You never figure it out,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
You just don't, and you
Hmm.
just catch glimpses of beauty now and then. And it's a wonderful game. It's a physical game. You get to walk. I love being outside. So I enjoy the game of golf in the summertime here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So I tend to find myself on the golf course a lot more than I used to. And I enjoy that. It's also a sport that I can enjoy with my son, my adult son.
Mm.
He enjoys playing, and we get out there as a father and a son. And I really cherish those rounds of golf more than any other round of golf
Mm.
for a year.
Who's winning that deal?
He's better than me now.
Uh-oh.
You know?
Was that a hard pill to swallow?
No. I want my son to beat me. I want
Yeah.
him to. I love it when he beats me. Now, I'm not going to, lay over, right?
Yes.
And we play for a drink at the turn, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, right? So there's still,
Yeah.
but I want to lose, but I'm not going to lose on purpose. I'm not stupid.
No.
No. So I play a lot of golf. And I also, I like to bird hunt. I got some bird dogs. I actually have one bird dog now. Like to get out and walk. I like being outside. So I do those in the fall, in the winter. If I'm not doing something in my home, I'm out golfing or chasing birds around the upper Midwest. I enjoy that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any land or a ranch of your own?
I did. I sold it though.
Okay.
I'm not a big maintainer.
Okay.
I'm probably down to 3 keys in my life. Don't like fixing stuff. I had some hunting camp and an old log cabin. It was kind of cool, except something's always needing to be fixed, and I'm just not go up there and put a new roof on or, do, it got to be kind of a load. And then the other thing for me is, I was going up there and I was alone. My son doesn't enjoy it. My wife and my daughter wouldn't be caught dead up there. So, I decided that I would just sell that. And I still do some trips. I do a lot of day trips from my home, but the hunting land I had that I personally owned in hunting camp, I sold it about 2 years ago and haven't looked back.
So you just got rid of that. You just hop onto other locations with other guys and go have some guy trips.
I live in a wonderful part of the country where I can get access to this stuff I don't live in the Metroplex where you got to drive and you got to know somebody. I just go an hour and a half north of here and I'm in my little piece of heaven.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
One more thing I was going to ask about the golf scenario.
Yeah.
When you play, because you just went through all the stats of tracking yourself and looking at performance, the things that I would see that, someone who runs a company would like to test the company to see it's on, right? Did I 3-putt? How many fairways did I hit? Do you ever give yourself a mulligan?
Breakfast ball on the first hole.
Okay.
Right.
So for those that don't know what that means, that's 2 off the first box.
Yeah. I'm not above that.
Yeah.
I do not give myself a mulligan if I'm playing. I will tell you there has been times where I've given myself a 3-foot putt that I probably shouldn't. Right.
Okay.
Occasionally, if the ball lands in a footprint and a trap,
Yep.
I'll say that's not an act of God. That's a stupid person. I'll kick it out of the footprint.
Yep.
If I have a remote idea that there might be a rock anywhere near my ball, that I might fluff it a little bit. It's just to protect my golf club, right?
Sure.
Try to be a pretty real golfer though. And I play with some other guys that don't do that either. It helps, like you're talking about who you hang around with matters.
Yes.
The guys I play golf with don't foot wedge it much, so I don't either. So,
yeah, no, I think that's a big deal for me. Like you can go out and lie to yourself if you want to go lie to yourself. That's fine.
Yeah.
If you're looking to tell some story to somebody else that you did something you didn't really do, that's on you, right? You're not really testing yourself. You're not finding out who you are as a person. And I think, there's fun parts of it. Yeah, that's what's great about the sport and challenging yourself. But also you need to find out who you are. And you need to be able to stand behind that. You say you shot 75, you need to feel that with your chest. If you say you shot 85, man, that's the best you got that day, and you're going to beat it next time or whatever you got, right? So I love to hear you say, I play it by the rules,
I do.
I respect that because that's how we do it.
Yeah.
And that means a lot to me. Like for people that go out and you hear their golf game or you see their golf game and you see what they're doing and how they're reacting. I don't care if you shoot 100, you play by the rules, you play by the rules,
Truth. Yeah, it's a tough game though, man. It's a tough game. God, it's
Yeah.
humbling. God, it's humbling. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Those guys that come out and they say, it's just a little ball sitting on the ground. Surely I can hit this down the fairway. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
let's see you get at it,
Let's see, bud. Let's see how that works. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, like, I really appreciate someone of your caliber coming on our show and talking to us about, the nuances of business and leadership in general. And I think, like the podcast that you did where you talked about leadership, being the qualities that are really going to carry someone's company. Before we sign off, are there any things that you would just want to say just about leaders in general, or something that you should look for in people as leaders to help benefit your company just off the rip?
Yeah. Um, John Maxwell, a huge leadership mentor of mine who I've read, listened to his stuff, and he spoke a couple times at Nexstar events. He does everything rises and falls on leadership. And gosh, if that's the truth. If your business is suffering, if you're not doing as well as you can, it's so easy to find a circumstance or a person to blame other than yourself. But remember, if you run it, you're in charge of everything, meaning you have control. It's either a decision you've made or haven't made. And, you can almost feel like you don't get down on yourself. I find that statement really empowering, because then I can change it. If you're waiting for the market to get better, or you're waiting for, you're blaming a service manager that you hired that went sideways, right? It doesn't do you any good to blame that person for very long, right?
Yeah.
Might be true, but you hired him or her,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think it's just, it's just owning the results in your business and quite honestly in your life, right? There's so many parallels of business leadership to life leadership. And I made a lot of mistakes, Brandon, right? So I'm not sitting here holier than thou or self-righteous here, but just owning where you are, owning your relationships. That's now I feel like I'm going to be a life coach. I'm going to stop right now, but just owning results.
Oh, that's great.
Just owning results in your life, whether it's your weight, whether it's your driving record, whether it's, your business performance, whether it's the relationships in your life, they're all because of decisions you've made or haven't made and actions you've taken or haven't taken. And that's a big tenet we teach at Nexstar. We taught at Nexstar for years. And boy, I found that to be valuable, not just in business, but outside of business. So, be a leader in your life too, right? Big challenge.
Yeah, carry on the things that you are preaching at work every day. Try to take that throughout the rest of your life.
God, it's tough though. Jeez, I wish it was easier. So much easier to scapegoat, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's fun. Like it's really exciting for me to hear someone from you who's done this thing and just to hear the stories that you've gone through. It's exciting for me as I start to build my company.
Yeah.
We're 15, 16 months in now, right?
Wow.
And we're growing pretty fast. We're doing really well. And and so I'm excited about that. At the same point, like I started way too far into these gray hairs, but at the end of the day, like I'm going to be 50 in about a year and a half, right?
Oh,
and
wow.
so
Okay.
I'll take it. I'll
You're in the
I'll
best
see
years, buddy. You're in the best. You got wisdom. You still got your health. You still got drive. You didn't start too late.
Well, I feel. Thank you for that. I really appreciate those words, honestly, because I feel on fire. I still feel young, and I'm excited about it. And every time I get to talk to someone like you, who's really done a lot of things in their life, like it's very inspirational, and it feels it's more logs on the fire for me. So
Awesome.
I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat with us, on the podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Brent. I've enjoyed our conversation, and I hope it's helpful to other folks. And I've learned a lot. So thank you for that. I mean it.
Yeah, 100%. And we will grab that golf game whenever you come back in town.
We'll do it. Not for money, though.
Jack,
I think you're better than I am. So
we'll do it for the drink of the turn. How about that?
There you go. Got you there.
All right, buddy. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate everything. Until next time, everybody, it's The Blueprint.